Welcome to Give Your Job Away. I'm Michelle Morehouse. I come from a lifetime of church ministry, and I'm here with...
I'm Matt Pilot, and we wrote a book together called Give Your Job Away. I'm a pastor in church ministry, over 30 years of church ministry, Michelle.
Give Your Job Away is for the pastor, ministry leader, the church worker who is just interested in maximizing their capacity and optimizing the body of Christ.
Yeah, we talk about finding your gaps, all about what those gaps are, and then how to fill them so that ministry leaders can thrive in ministry. And Michelle, you and I have a rich history of a few years serving together at Christ Fellowship down South Florida, at Stewart campus. In fact, we're right here at the Stewart campus where we met, you and your husband and I, and did great ministry. And this is where we kind of got this idea to write this book, Give Your Job Away.
Yes, from experience, we learned that we hit our limitations. We can't do it all. We can't be all for all. And so giving your job away is about bringing people bringing alongside those high-level volunteers that can help us and partner in ministry. And today we're talking about how to find our focus.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. When we're identifying our gaps is one thing. Mm-hmm. But through identifying the gaps, we can also have a hyper focus on the things that we're good at, the areas where we're strong.
Well, and gaps reveal all your at least for me, my weaknesses, my shortcomings, the areas I'm not great at. But you're right, before I can fill the gaps, which we have all kinds of exercises and processes to find the people and the systems, you can't do that, Michelle, unless you kind of know what you are. In fact, I'm 51 now, and I've got empty nest. It was in my 20s and 30s that I was kind of performing and proving. Mm-hmm. And then in my 30s where I started to repair because I was making mistakes and I was undisciplined and I was trying to do it all, be it all. And so that's when my awareness started kicking in and I had to be humbled and correct and repair. But in my 40s, as I kept on in ministry, it was a refinement process that I was secure enough in what God has called me to do, but humble enough to be aware of what I'm not so that I could realize what I am.
Oh, Matt, that is rich in just practicality. I think we all, in those early phases of life, in those early stages of ministry, when we're trying to impress and trying to produce, I think we can get caught up in being all in all situations. And the truth is, we're not built for that. God never intended for us to be the solution for all of those areas where we need to fill in our ministry. He actually created the body of Christ so that we each have those places where we can invite people in.
I think as you're saying that, I think for the listener, you just blessed somebody just now. You just said that you're not the answer for everything. God didn't make you to do that. And the reason why I think that's so freeing and liberating for every one of us is when you take on a ministry role, whether as a volunteer leader or as a staff person, which you and I did here. We worked together at Christ Fellowship. Here's the job description. Here's the responsibility. It's fast, ready, set, go.
Yes.
And yet, true. Michelle, you are a gifted leader, but you're also a mom and a wife, and you like to write, and you were a great, before the early days, you were a singer.
So were you.
I'm a piano player.
Yes.
For a long time, I was the only campus pastor that also was a musician. And let me just tell you, musical people, we don't think like A. I'm a B type personality in an A world. And so I think that's so liberating for you to say God didn't intend for you to be what you're not. And there's a better way to do it. Talk about how you can be unique and be your true self in a world that has so much, it puts you in a box of what you're supposed to be and do.
And I think starting out, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier about your early years. What did you say your 20s and 30s were?
Well, it's my proving year. Look how good I can do this. I'm going to show everybody how much I can do.
Yes. And I think that's the mindset of just that generation, that age bracket, right? We are trying to see what we can do, because there's so much opportunity. We're seeing it even more, like, look at all that I can do. And so we don't want to limit ourselves in any way. And I think because of that, because we want to try everything and do everything, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But if we do that for so long, if we continue to do that, we'll dilute ourselves, and we won't be as strong in the unique, particular way that God has wired us to be strong.
Well, so great. And again, it is good in your 20s, 30s. And I work with a lot of young adult leaders who just have a call and the passion, they're getting after it. And I do think you and I both were in those zones where you sing and you lead and you do this and you get married and all this. And so you are kind of experimenting with what am I not? It's not that you just, this understanding your identity, your unique makeup, it takes you years to get there. And so it's all right to experiment and dabble in things. I didn't realize I could be an author, but I've written some books and I wrote my best book with you. But I do think that the power of focus is more powerful impact.
I love that. That is really good. So talk about the impact of being more focused.
Well, I'll just talk about what I learned as a campus pastor. I was the campus pastor here at Christ for 14 years. Like I held the record of the longest campus pastor who I still kept my job. I can't believe it, because I think the first 7 years I was still in my old mindset of musician plus pastor. We were 7 years in high school, set up, tear down. Anybody in storefronts or hotels or schools? I love you. You're my people. You're my tribe. Keep going. And then we got to build. We're in the building right now that we built by faith, and we were there for 7 years. And that's when you and Jeff and Dirk and Jake Kendall played drums, and Dirk's the piano player, and that's where we met. So I think that in those years, again, I had to do it all, be it all, and that's good to be aware of how to do kids ministry and how to collect the finances and how to the insurance. I didn't know insurance. I'm the piano player.
Yes,
but I do think I started to experiment with what's having the greatest fruit, what's getting the campus to be healthy and grow and move forward with health. And I realized there were three things that I did, that if I spent most of my time playing that role, that everything just started to be healthy and organized and move forward. And the three things for me, and these may be different for every pastor, but for me, based on who I am, was if I just love people, if I build teams, and if I develop leaders. Now, I still set up and tore down at times. I still prayed. I still did some Bible study. I did a lot of other things, but 80% of my time, as much as possible, I did those things well. And when I did that, love people, build teams, develop leaders, the campus flourished. So that's when, Michelle, I started realizing, who am I? How has God made me? And then how do I express that in just some clear, focused mindsets?
Yes.
And what that did, Michelle, because ministry moves fast. It's complex. I was talking to leaders last night who they said, we've got to raise the money so we can do the ministry. And how do we do it all? So the power of focus slows the game down so I can get a handle on what am I doing and what's worth my time.
Yes.
That's the power of focus.
And I didn't have that same mindset growing. I mean, I didn't have those same jobs. I didn't grow up leading a church, but I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was also, you do so many things in your life that I think you want to try, you want to explore, you want to know what's out there that's possible. And sometimes that can be distracting. All of the options can be distracting.
That's good.
And I think whenever you can narrow your focus into something that's concrete, that becomes a filter for all future decisions. Like if you know who you are, you know how God's wired you, you can have this statement of this is who I am, this is what I do, and that then can become a filter to help you sort of edit out what is best. God talks about it, what is good, pleasing, and perfect. I think there's three levels. There's a good, there's a pleasing, then there's a perfect. And it takes a little while to get to that third level and to focus enough to find out what is the very, very, very best choice. So yeah, I think that is for me, that primary ID statement exercise. It took a little while, but narrowing it down to a statement has been really empowering.
I remember walking into your office one day, which I always bother you because I wanted to not just check on how you're doing, but just like run ideas by you. And you had some statements on your wall. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where this kind of birthed from. You called it your primary. What'd you call it?
Primary identity statement.
Primary identity statement. Mm-hmm. And yet you had a role with all the problems and responsibility expectations and other campus coordinators, and then you were a connections coordinator. But was it possible for you to not only create that statement, but to live in that statement, even in the confines of the expectations in ministry?
That's a really good question, because I think sometimes we identify ourselves by the job that we're in, or we identify ourselves as the phase of life we're in. And that, I think, is more confining than maybe just saying, okay, this is my identity statement. And that's why I love the identity statement idea, mm-hmm. is because it crosses over no matter the job title, no matter the geographic location or the phase of life. It doesn't matter. It can still be applicable to wherever you're at. And we write about it in the book. We actually write our own ID statements in the book. So Matt, do you want to read yours?
Yeah, you had yours first, and I'm like, I got to catch up with Michelle because I can't let her outdo me, because yours is so beautiful. Mine is, I'm a child of God and a follower of Jesus, which I'm going to stop there. Before I talk about what I do, it's who I am. Mm-hmm. That's the first part of it. Then I say, I'm a faithful husband. Again, I want to make sure my marriage is strong, so out of that flows ministry. A loving father and a loyal friend. I'm a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ and a builder of his church. I have a pastor's heart and a musical gift. That's that uniqueness, which I use to glorify God and touch the heart of people. And I am fun.
Of course you are.
I think I am. See, like your husband, Jeff, and I, we'll tell a joke and no one laughs, but we laugh at ourselves.
Yes.
Because we're a 3 on the Enneagram.
Yes. And my husband says that he's the funniest person he knows. And that's all that matters.
Your husband will send me a text and says 3, which is Enneagram stuff, another thing. But so I'm fun, I'm relational, but I'm driven, and I'm positive. And before you read yours, I think this is as you were talking earlier, Michelle, I've been here 20 years this year at Christ Fellowship, 30 years in ministry. And what I've found is people kind of already know what I am, whether I want to admit it or not.
It's so true.
They already got you figured out, me figured out. So rather than hide it or try to do everything, I think what I found is the areas that I stink at, that are average, if they don't fire you, they actually create a job for you. And what they've been doing over the years is as I've been focused on what I am and what I do, they've literally put me in those niches or those specialties. So that's what's so great about this statement is you do what you're responsible to do, but you are now coaching leaders. Mm-hmm. You're working for an organization. You told me last night, Kelly and I, you're having other opportunities because you're being faithful to who you are, what you do. That's the power of this.
I kept this to myself. Like, I just thought, well, I'm just the strange one who needs like this motivational statement to sort of fuel me. But I realized that by having that and by telling other people how important it's been for me, mm-hmm. I realized that it becomes a rudder for your life. Like, knowing who you are, knowing how God has wired you, allows you to navigate life a little bit more assuredly. Like you just have this confidence. Like, I understand that there's always going to be, like what you're saying, future opportunity, because now I'm so connected to this purpose that God has placed in me. And I'll read mine. It says, to continue to grow in the love of Christ in complete dependence on his wisdom. And that's there's my resource. There's my strength. That's what is fueling me.
It's good.
To encourage, value, and build up those in my sphere of influence so that we can know joy, be fulfilled, and become the best version of our created purpose. In that last part of my primary ID statement, I can boil it down to 2 words. I am an improver and I'm a developer. And it can be that simple. Like, I know that because that's where I find the most fulfillment. That's where my heart beats faster. It's where I find joy and that connection and that nurturing part of my life. So it's been interesting. And even in reading this, I didn't actually develop it until later in life, but even in reading this, I can point back into my 20s and into my 30s where this would have applied.
Yeah.
Because it's who I'm wired to be. So by putting it in a statement, it's not limiting at all.
No.
In fact, it's more freeing.
Yeah.
Because it allows me to navigate life with that good, pleasing, and perfect
So good.
focus in mind.
So many things that you said there that I just have, I don't want to repeat what you said, but you said I improve things, I develop things. Part of that humble confidence is when you come into a job or a church or a situation or a group of people, you're like, I know what I can bring here.
Yes.
I know how I can help. And then the second thing you said, because you talked about joy in your statement, it brings you joy to operate in things that fill you up with passion and that fill others up. You go home. I've learned this in ministry. When I'm doing ministry right and investing in people and caring for them, sacrificing, serving in my zone, I'll leave church on Sunday exhausted but fulfilled.
Exactly.
I left it all on the field. What's difficult is when I'm not quite sure I'm doing everything and I'm not fulfilled, I'm confused, I don't feel like I'm making a difference. And there's so much power in that statement to know this is what I can offer and this is what fills me as I do it.
I often have said, and this will just give you a little bit insight into me, I'm not a Sam's Club, Costco type of person because it's so big and so overwhelming, and the thought of buying in bulk sort of just overwhelms my brain. But I love to shop at Aldi. There's 4 rows. I know exactly where everything is. And I know what to buy because the same things are there every week. But it's that limited, it's the art of the edit. Have you ever heard of that? Art of the edit?
I'm glad we're talking about that.
When we can edit things down to their simplest, less complicated form, that's where we find fulfillment.
Well, editing is so good. I thought about, I've had to do reducing in my life. It's always fun to add more, and I'll get this, and I'll have this, and I'll have that. But actually that creates confusion and stress. And we live in anxiety and stress. And so this is so freeing to limit yourself. It isn't that, I don't do windows. I remember you coming here and you and your husband and your kids just serve, you sweat, you do everything. So we're willing to do anything, but say, this is what I really bring to the table. And it's so freeing to reduce. In fact, my boss was talking to our campus pastors recently. He said, don't just have a to-do list, have a to-don't list.
Oh, that's really good.
What do we don't do anymore? Or as our friend Scott Fay, he said this once, he was mentoring me as you go to higher levels. When you go to, listen to this ministry leader, when you go to higher levels of more teams, more people, more ministries, you actually have to ask yourself, what am I going to do less of? And what am I going to do more of? That's a picture of focus.
Yes, and that's exactly what the primary ID statement did for me. I've read this from the E-Myth. Michael E. Gerber says, great people have a vision for their lives that they practice emulating each and every day. They go to work on their lives, not just in their lives. Their lives are spent living out the vision they have of their future in the present. And I think that is exactly what a primary ID statement does. It gives you vision that's crystal clear, and you're thinking of the future when you can filter things through this primary ID statement.
That's so good. A quote I think about from Brian Tracy is, if you don't have a vision for your week, someone else will.
Ooh, that's good.
So that goes back to, it isn't that I'm not a servant leader and I go there, I'm going to go serve a lady on Monday with some bottled water and love her. I'm always going to go serve and sacrifice, but I'm going to spend the most of my time saying I'm responsible not only just for my health, but to be effective. It's stewardship. Identity statement, Michelle, is stewardship of, I want to give my best to situation. Now, we also talk about gaps because it also means if I'm editing, I'm only doing 3 things. Like I told you as a campus pastor, I love people, build teams, develop leaders. That forces me to say, I got to develop leaders to handle the other areas.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is what you don't know, and we said this in the previous episode, but when we identify our gaps, we're identifying the opportunities. So by having a primary ID statement, this is where you're fulfilled, but the opportunities are what's going to fulfill other people because they're wired for the things that you're not. And I think that is what we learned, and what you're so great at is giving away jobs that are suited for the person because of their gifting and because of their wiring. We go through an exercise in the book, and it's sort of based on the Joe Harry window. So we say that we start with, if observation leads to evaluation, which leads to introspection, and then there's this consecration. And I worked through these just on my own to come up with a primary ID statement. And there's little hints and steps inside of each of those quadrants. But it was through this exercise that I actually felt God's blessing. That it was like a commissioning that gave me this confidence that to do what God has called me to do because I identified it.
Well, you didn't just identify what you're good at. You are one of the greatest empowerment of leaders and people. You drew to you high capacity men and women to you, which is very difficult. A woman in ministry. We'll talk about that in another episode.
Yes, we are.
Women and men in ministry. But I just watched the people flourished here. I love in Proverbs it says, when the righteous lead, the people flourish. And that's what you and your husband did here at this campus. And that's why we wanted to come do this video podcast right where it all started. And it's such a blessing to still do ministry with you and write this book together. This book has all kinds of exercises. In fact, Michelle and I are available to you. If you want to reach out to us on Instagram or Facebook, we have a website, giveyourjobaway.com. This book is available on Amazon as Audible. We have Audible book. We actually read our own book, right?
Yes.
A lot of late nights doing that, right? With these microphones. And ebook, printed book. If you want to reach out to us, we'll help you with your primary ID statement. We'll actually we've coached pastors and leaders. However we can serve you, we want to do that. Michelle, thanks for writing this book with me. Anything you want to say to the team here?
No, I am just thrilled. I think it's great to know where your focus is for your life, for your ministry, as well as for your church. Any business book will say that having that vision is so important. And so that's why we start here, is because having that vision statement for yourself, for your organization, is what's going to allow God to do even greater things, to increase your capacity and optimize the body of Christ.
Well, thanks everybody. Watch our other episodes coming up on Give Your Job Away.